When you have something that you want to give in the way of feedback, or there's something that is, uh, on your mind and it's causing you frustration internally, how do you guys go about approaching communication that could be around delicate topics or something that could potentially offend the other person?
Yeah. The first step is for us, we make sure that the other person has space to be able to hear it and receive it. And so that's as simple as saying, hey, I want to talk to you about something. Do you have space now? And if you don't have space now, when will you have space? And let's coordinate. May take, you can be really detailed and super structured or super in a masculine energetic and say, it's going to take 20 to 25 minutes, or this is how long it's going to take. This is when my preference is
Here's an
to
agenda.
yeah, basically you can get really super structured, or you can be a little bit more fluid with it. But just asking that person, hey, really would just love to connect on something that's really important to me. That's a good way to frame it as well, because, if you come in saying, hey, look, I want to talk to you about something that's really sensitive, and you sort of know they don't have time for another 3 hours, that could be stewing on that. So just say, hey, I want to talk about something that's really important. When do you have some space? And then they say, of course, now, or how long do you need? You may say, I need an hour. Cool, 6 p.m. tonight, done. That works for me as well. Let's
Yeah.
chat then. Let's connect then.
I feel like you guys are pretty next level in terms of your experience in relationships, and your level of groundedness and self-worth is really, really quite powerful. In
It's an important
my
part, and then self-worth part.
yeah,
Because, when we don't have that
most of the
self-worth, we
game.
project. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Totally. But what happens if, because if I was to bring that up and mention that with Danny, or she was to bring it up with me, just based on where
Mm.
I'm at the moment, I would be thinking, well, what is it? Like, what do you want to talk? Like the stewing thing.
Yeah.
Uh, do you ever drop any pre-frame? Is it not relevant for you to kind of pre-frame, uh, you know, everything's all sweet, it's just something that I want to bring up to help further create connection in our relationship? Or
Well, Christine has had in the past tendency to worry a little bit. It's just one of her patterns. It's nothing massively intense. Well, it can be intense, but nothing massively intense. She's really done a lot of deeper work around that and shifted through that. So I'm mindful of that, and I'm aware. I'm cognizant about. I mean, you've got to be cognizant of your partner's wounds or your
mm,
partner's pain points. She's very cognizant of mine. She's very cognizant of how she communicates to me, the words that she uses, the body language, all of that. She's very deliberate and intentional with how she looks at me, where she places her hands, and I'm the same with her as well.
wow.
Do we have to pre-frame and preface? And that becomes natural, by the way. It seems like it's a lot of work, but it's really not. It's just being kind and compassionate with each other. That's considerate. It's just being considerate of the other person's. Step in their shoes for a moment. And I wouldn't say to her, hey, I've got something to talk to you about. Can we talk about it later? If I know she's in a really stressed out position right now, I'd wait till she's more receptive, or I'll just wait until I know she's available to talk about
Mm,
something. But even then, I may not know, because she may have the time, but she may not have the internal space or the internal emotional bandwidth to want to deal with something deep. And so if she might ask, she might say, look, is it something super serious? I have to be really attentive. And I will just be honest and say yes, no, maybe, whatever that looks like. So after we've gone through that process, and you don't need to preface anything, but you can if it makes you feel better.
mm,
Um, you just go through a process of sitting across from your partner, making sure that physiologically you're facing each other, especially for the man facing, in a heteronormative dynamic, the man is facing the woman, because biologically and from an evolutionary perspective, when we would hunt as men, when we would be out in the wild as men, we would usually be side to side or back to back with our males. And it's a very male thing to be side to side. When we're with females, we're generally more face to face. And so there's a lot that's said about us coming together and being face to face. There's a presence that comes with that. And again, that presence leads to availability, leads to reliability, leads to trustworthiness. And then that ultimately leads to safety. So again, your body language and how you posture yourself, if your partner's love language is physical touch their hand when you're talking to them about serious things or things that are really important to you and to your heart and to the relationship. Let them know
mm.
that you're there and you care. Make it about, other things that we're both very mindful of, is not making it about them, but making it about us. So if she's done something that's upset me, I don't want to say to her, you said this and it upset me. because I'm sort of diffusing responsibility there, and I'm just saying basically you change the way you express and communicate so I don't feel bad. That's codependency, and that's me giving my power away. A more effective way to say it, and a more place of ownership and responsibility, is when I heard you say this, or when you said this in this way, what it reminded me of was ... or how it made me feel was ... And whilst that's not your responsibility, I'm just checking in with myself, and I'm wondering, can we communicate to that differently because it's sensitive for me, or it's a bit of a pain point for me. Now, that level of vulnerability can be difficult because, again, men, from an evolutionary perspective, aren't really conditioned to be vulnerable, and culturally we're not conditioned to be vulnerable. That layered on top of, compounded, layered on top of the biological aspect. So just being mindful of this stuff, being mindful of how you would want to be spoken to. It's not that hard. It's, you know, it's treat your neighbor as you want to be treated. It's sort of simple stuff, and just giving it some attention and thought, as opposed to coming in as a wounded child and saying you. But what about if we look at ourselves? You know, that old adage, you know, you're pointing one finger, three are pointing back at you. Well, what about that? And we just, okay, well, how can we be responsible for this and bring that level of responsibility to the conversation? So we're both really cognizant of that. And it doesn't always happen. And sometimes it's a bit of a shit show. But most of the time it's not. And it's because we care enough about ourselves and the relationship. And we know that the relationship is a vehicle for our own internal growth as well. So call it selfish to some degree, or selfish selflessness. What I call it is, there is a selfish component there of, if I show up in a really healthy way here, I get healthy feedback, which gives me insight and creates openness in my being, mind, heart, body, and gives me insight into how I can evolve as a man, as a human being. And I value that, you know, and so does she.
Yeah. There's so many beautiful pieces of wisdom there. Really appreciate you sharing that. It's really on point as well. One thing I found for me is that if I'm fantastic as a man at sharing vulnerabilities intellectually. So I'll say what's going on for me. Where I have struggled is sharing it emotionally. So for example, I might say, look, what you said earlier, you know, that really hurt my feelings. And, you know, it made me feel, you know, unworthy and XYZ, just as opposed to like looking at her in the eye and having that presence there, and then just allowing the emotion to come through. And what I found, and I guess this probably would differ with different people, but with my relationship with Danny, who is very emotional herself, like she's really an empath, she's very feeling based. I could say everything exactly how it's going on, and a lot of it, she can't receive it if I'm not expressing the emotion that comes with it. Do you think, what's your opinion on that?
I have a couple of thoughts on that. For men in particular, this is we're learning how to walk. And when we're speaking about vulnerability and emotions, we're learning how to walk, and we can learn to walk a proper way, or we can learn to walk a very inefficient way, which is going to cause spinal issues and hip issues and joint issues later on down the track, right? So we can learn to emote and express in a healthy way that suits who we are as men and who we are in healthy masculine postures, or we can become something that we're not. We all strive for familiarity. Men want women to understand them because most men, for various reasons, biological and cultural, to simplify it, don't emote really well and are more analytical and logical in their thinking. They're more linear in their thinking. That doesn't mean they're better at it. It just means that that's more of a go-to strategy for a male brain and a masculine individual. And again, there are evolutionary reasons to that, okay? And we want women to understand us. Like, women want us to express feelings. Why? Yes, females, again, hormonally, biologically, evolutionarily, there are reasons why women are able to tap into their emotions at a different level. We both have limbic systems that govern, emotionally regulate us. But we're not, as men, we're not conditioned culturally as well, socially. It's not really accepted. Boys don't cry. Be a man, don't be a little baby. stop being a sissy, all these things, these slogans and ideologies are perpetuated through our culture. But let me go back to this. So, men want women to be this way, women want men to be this way, so to speak, because there's a familiarity there, right? And we thrive in familiarity and we feel safe in familiarity. But here's the reality. We don't want women to be like us. Yes, we want to be understood. We want to be seen. We want to be heard. We want to be respected, appreciated, and acknowledged. That's a basic human function. And women don't want us to emote wildly and in a leaky way or in a watery way. Not that women emote in a watery way, not at all. What we need is a healthy balance of, because before I go there, we complement each other. Difference drives polarity, drives attraction. Similarity creates safety. In a world that is uncertain and unsafe, we're going to want more safety. So we're going to want to be more like each other by default. But what we forget is that we need to celebrate difference because we complement each other. Our masculinity complements the femininity. The femininity complements our masculinity. Our strengths and weaknesses as a species meet in union. There's something really beautiful about that. We need to celebrate our differences. We don't want to be like each other.